After the amazing feedback on my waterscaping guide, I was really excited to post the second part. The amount of effort and care that people are putting into their islands is just amazing. In this episode, we'll be going all the way back to the roots of island making, analyzing how to choose the perfect theme for your island, learning some basics of color theory, understanding the effect of item placement, and how to create depth. Finally, we'll incorporate all of these concepts together to manifest the island of your dreams. Welcome to part 2 of my complete landscaping guide. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Any great island begins with a great idea. That's why it's crucial to select the correct island theme. A lot of people feel drawn to perfect islands that appear on YouTube or Instagram. By default, these ones have a wonderful structure, making them amazing role models for anyone. Another great source to good ideas is by looking at real-life cities, villages, or even landscapes. Some of the best creations in game were inspired by real-life places. Or you can simply begin by taking action upon that idea that you have been thinking for such a long time, but you just don't know how to implement it into your island. You can also consider having more than one island theme. In my case, I've got 2 of them. The top part of my island is an enchanted forest, as opposed to the bottom, which is a Mexican beach town. Today, I chose a Halloween festival as my main island theme, which is pretty spooky. Great, now that you have selected your main theme, it's time to talk about the subthemes. These are the areas that you're going to build around the island that are more specific than your main island theme. For instance, let's say that you chose to build a city. The subthemes will be maybe a supermarket, a park, the neighborhoods, and anything else that you can find inside a city. In my case, since my main island theme will be a Halloween festival, the subthemes will be all of the attractions, the food stalls, and maybe even the green areas. When making all of these subdivisions, you will also need to think about how you will incorporate all of the main buildings and houses in-game into your construction. I will link a website down in the description with all of the measurements from all of the buildings in-game, so feel free to check it out. You're doing amazing. After having a better idea of how your island layout looks like, it's time to select the items. Just ask yourself, what kind of stuff would I find at a place like this? From what type of materials are the structures made up of? What kind of vegetation would be growing on my island, if any? By making yourself these questions, you get a better idea of what you should get before you start building, and what you should get away from since it doesn't really match your theme. I would like to build a ginormous roller coaster, which actually ended up being pretty tiny. Anyways, I would need some custom paths and a pumpkin carriage to make it. As for the rest of the festival, I'll be using some street lights, benches, Halloween vegetation, and decoration alongside other items. Cool, we've chosen all of our items, but what color should they be? Let's learn a bit about color theory and color combinations. By looking at the color wheel, it's pretty easy to notice shades of reds, greens, yellows, and blues. But which one should you choose for your island? Well, there's 2 ways in which I like to combine them with one another. My favorite way to make my color palette is by simply choosing colors that are next to each other. For instance, you could select orange, yellow, and green to make a forest, and they would fit in perfectly with each other. On WindWay, I use this technique, selecting warm colors such as pink, red, oranges, yellows, and light greens to make the beach sound, as opposed to the enchanted forest, where I chose purple, different hues of blues, and dark greens to landscape the area. Now, the second technique is a bit different. You will choose colors from opposite sides of the palette, such as blue and orange, green and purple, or red and cyan. You will notice that these colors don't blend in quite well at first glance. This is where we bring in the neutral colors. These colors either have very low saturation, which basically means that they have very little pigment, or they are completely black and white. Here's an example from before. These are the saturated versions of the orange and blue colors by themselves. And this is what happens when we add neutral colors. There's such a big difference. It's as if the colors were able to find harmony with one another. On my theme park, I'll be using mostly reds, oranges, and yellows as my main colors. As for my neutral colors, I'll be using different shades of browns as well as black and white. This is the final step. Now that we have all of our items, it's just a matter of learning how to place them. I would like to start off by talking about the very simple yet powerful tool of symmetry. If you're building anything rustic or natural, make it asymmetrical. By placing items relatively randomly, you will capture perfectly the essence of imperfection, which is something that you always see out on the wilderness or in villages. Cities and sci-fi buildings are extremely symmetrical. By making these types of structures proportional, your end results will be out of this world for sure. You can clearly see this projected on my island, the forest being pretty asymmetrical, whereas we can say quite the opposite for my beach town, looking really symmetrical. Another great resource is to use perspective. You might have seen a lot of islands where they use panels, climbing walls, and other items to make houses, mansions, or even castles in the background. In these instances, we're using forced perspective, which is nothing more than an optical illusion. But how do we make one? Well, it's mostly a process of trial and error. But there is a way to highlight a certain object within a landscape. For example, let's take a look at this picture. Clearly, the first thing that we see is the house. But why? When our brains are used to a certain pattern, we stop paying attention to it, just like the forest in the picture. But when there's something that breaks the pattern, in this case, the house, our brains automatically perceive that before anything else. Lastly, this is a personal preference, but I really like to give every item its own purpose, whether it's something relevant in a building, such as the teacup ride, which is one of the main attractions in my festival, all the way back to the tiniest objects in the background. They should all be able to tell the same story and coexist in harmony. I've got one last tip for you. Simply expect the unexpected. Whenever you create something, you will always discover new things, and your plans might even flip upside down. When I first created WindWay, I planned on building a normal village with neighborhoods and some public areas. But when I was about to finish the last location, which was my Mexican resort, I liked it so much that I decided to destroy my whole island and rebuild it upon that theme. This decision completely changed the outcome of my island. In fact, if I wouldn't have done that, most likely my island would have never been noticed by anyone, resulting in me not even having this channel on the first place, which is just bonkers.